There are many areas in the refinery that are not designed for human occupancy. We call these confined spaces. In the course of your job, from time to time, you may need to enter these spaces. This video will show you the procedures required for your safety and health. Confined space is defined as an area not normally entered by people and not designed to be occupied. It may have limited access and exits. It may have possible toxic atmosphere due to poor ventilation. It may have entrapment hazards. Some examples are tanks, vessels, floating roofs, process unit drains, and any excavations more than 4 feet deep. Wherever there is a likelihood, however remote, that an atmosphere that is immediately dangerous to life or health could occur, the confined space is called a permit-required confined space. Virtually every confined space in the refinery is a permit-required confined space. Each department that has confined spaces in their area must make a list of them. They must also make a hazard analysis of the space that takes into account oxygen deficiency, too much oxygen, toxic atmosphere, flammability, mechanical hazards, electrical hazards, and entrapment hazards. Whenever it is necessary to enter any confined space, the department having control over the space must consult the analysis and prepare written entry procedures that are based on possible or known hazards.
Nathan, there's a couple things I want to go over with you before I can give you entry to this tank. We do know of a couple items that we're concerned about: lead, benzene, and we've got some samples in the lab now. So when we get those back, I'll get with you and let you know. And if you would, you can take a look in here in this area and that's what we're going to be going into. Okay?
Well, how soon can we get it in?
Probably within an hour, maybe a couple of hours, I should be able to get you in okay.
Just fine.
And now we do have a written procedure here. I'm going to give you a copy of that written procedure. I want to make sure that you cover it with all of your employees before you're allowed to go in.
This written procedure will be used to instruct entrants in what the hazards of the space are and how they'll be protected. Permit-required spaces have to have an attendant present whenever people are inside the space. Several other hazard control measures will be listed on the entry permit. They include personal protective equipment for the identified hazards, respirators required, if any, equipment cleanup method prior to opening equipment, isolation necessary, equipment ventilation, calibration of testing equipment, and conditions for hot work. All employees should be able to recognize permit-required confined spaces, and everyone should be aware that they are prohibited from entering those confined spaces unless they have the proper training and follow the entry procedures. Before a permit is posted, the confined space must be prepared for entry. Operators will make sure that confined spaces are isolated by closing, locking, and tagging all block valves.
Okay, looks good, Paul.
Piping and ducts will either be blanked or air-gapped as close to the confined space as possible. The person authorizing entry will determine that the entry permit conditions, procedures, practices, and equipment required for safe entry are in effect before authorizing or allowing entry into the confined space.
We have an emergency in the refinery. I need you to evacuate the tank out. Another tank out to get to evacuate, so I'm going to leave you in charge here.
Okay. Hey guys, we got to clear out. We've got an emergency.
The authorizing person will also order evacuation of entrance and cancel the entry authorization if the conditions established for entry change. Maintenance may be required to assist with the isolation of the confined space by providing and installing blanks, air-gapping lines, and disconnecting energy sources. Lockout, tagout, tryout procedures are carefully followed to ensure full isolation. Fresh air ventilation may be required where there's potential for air contamination. In this case, a fan or blower will be used, drawing fresh air only. If there is to be any hot work in the confined space, certain conditions must be met. The person writing the permit must notify all attendants and entrants of these conditions. After the authorizing person has prepared the entry permit,
The fire protection inspector will perform atmospheric testing, inspect the site, and confirm that the permit requirements have been met. Then the fire protection inspector will post the entry permit.
No one is allowed to enter a confined space until the entry permit has been posted. In fact, unposted spaces will be barricaded, preventing entry until the entry permit has been posted. If you're going into a confined space, it's your responsibility to know what to do there. It's also your responsibility to know what to do in case of an emergency.
You guys got your permits? Hot work permit? Okay. You going in now?
No, I got some more equipment.
How many guys to be here?
Just two.
Entrance, attendants, and authorizing persons must have the appropriate training before they can perform their assigned duties under the permit-required confined space program. Understanding the hazards which may be faced during entry, as well as the signs, symptoms, and consequences of exposure, is vital to the safety and health of you and your co-workers. Entrants have the responsibility to understand the equipment requirements for entering confined spaces. You must understand what personal protective equipment is required by each permit. You must ensure that all electrical equipment is grounded and confirm that lighting fixtures and tools are explosion-proof. If pneumatic tools are used, they must be powered by air only. Nitrogen or other compressed gases cannot be used. Attendants will remain outside the permit space at all times during entry.
Hey, hold up there, hold up. You can't go in there. You got to have your badge on the board here. And see, it says you got to have right protective equipment and also a hole man.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
They must be
Appreciate it.
located
Thanks.
where they can ensure that unauthorized persons do not enter the permit space and continuously maintain an accurate accounting of all persons in the space. The attendant will monitor activities inside and outside of the permit space to determine if it is safe for entrants to remain in the space.
Hey, Tarn, you okay? Come on out there, man. Come on out. What's the matter? You okay? You lose your breath? Let me get somebody up here.
And they have to maintain effective and continuous contact with entrants during entry, detect behavioral effects of hazard exposures,
Okay?
and evacuate entrants when a condition is observed which is not allowed on the entry permit.
Let me have your hat. You're right, you're fire and safety now.
The attendant must also be prepared to summon emergency response crews in the event of an emergency. Everyone must be alert and maintain constant surveillance for conditions that could violate the permit. Remember that as you work, conditions may change.
An emergency in the same zone will automatically suspend any hot work in the confined space, but other work not involving hot work may continue in areas unaffected by the emergency. If the permitted space is in the affected area, it will be evacuated. Working in confined spaces can be dangerous. Anyone involved in confined space entry must be trained and receive annual refresher training in the requirements of this practice. Your supervisor will give you unit and job-specific training. Make it your business to be aware of your responsibilities in confined space entry. Your safety and health and that of others depends on it. And now a review of some important points of confined space entry. Before entering a confined space, there must be confirmation of isolation and lockout, tagout, tryout. A written procedure will explain entry procedure and all requirements for the confined space, such as ventilation and special procedures for hot work. The department in charge of the space will prepare the entry permit, and fire and safety will post it. Entrants must be trained for entry and understand the specific hazards of the confined space and emergency procedures that may be necessary.
Attendants will remain outside the permit space at all times during entry.
And be alert for any circumstance that is not allowed on the permit. If you have any questions about confined space entry, talk to your supervisor.